Bonjour à tous. Welcome everyone, excellencies, distinguished guests. I will be moderating this morning session. We will be delving into the energy, commodities, and strategy topic for the Global South with a specific focus on the African continent, but also we'll have a guest speaker from Argentina, and we also have speakers from the Middle East that will help us discuss this issue. My name is Claire Davan. I am a governance specialist currently working at the World Bank in Sub-Saharan Africa, essentially on climate change. We have a little less than an hour today to discuss all the topics. We'll first go for a first round of questions for each of the speakers. We have about 5 to 6 minutes per speaker, and then we will invite everyone to interact and provide feedback on what's been said, and we'll open the conversation with the audience right after. I will briefly mention all of the titles of the speakers for our audience. Our first speaker is His Excellency Mr. Ibrahim Matola. He's a special envoy of the President of Malawi, working in the Ministry of Energy. We have Mrs. Carola Ramon. She will join us right after her panel, where she's held at the moment. She is the Vice President of CARI, former Undersecretary at the Ministry of Economy, former Undersecretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, at the Argentine Council for International Relations. We also have Mr. Al Abdullah Ibrahim from Bahrain, currently the Executive Director of the Bahrain Center for Strategic International and Energy Affairs. We have joining us from Czech Republic, Mr. Jan Ujeral, Secretary of the Special Envoy for Energy Security at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have from France joining us Monsieur Thierry Leperc, founder and president of Ideal, a platform that enables the production and the delivery of green hydrogen in Europe. We also have joining us from the UK, Mr. Mehmet Oguchu, and then I'm sorry for not pronouncing names properly. He is the chairman of the London Energy Club and Global Resources Partners. We have Mr. Maroun Kairouz from the World Economic Forum, based in Switzerland. He's the director of the Middle East and North Africa region. We have Mr. Hugo Trambali, Senior Advisor, Institute for International Policy Studies in Italy. I am not seeing our colleague, but he should be joining us in a minute. And our two last speakers, we have Professor Hegedorn from Sciences Po, based in Paris, a young professor of global food politics. And finally, we have Maxime Seneco. He's an ESG expert in sustainable finance. He's the director at Solvay Investment Group. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. And without further ado, we'll have our first speaker, His Excellency Mr. Ibrahim Matola, discuss one topic. And before I ask you a question, Your Excellency, I wanted for our audience to just have some facts in mind in this vast topic of energy, commodity, security. I wanted to ask you about something very specific. I was reading an article from The Economist from last year, which said that in the country you're coming from, in Malawi, 80% of the population is composed of subsistence farmers. And that is true of many countries in the region where Malawi is. And Sub-Saharan Africa is producing 94% of its staple food, of its basic required food. So interestingly enough, it's a region that is technically quite food secure, but paradoxically, what we've seen over the past few years, 2022, 2023, is food prices soaring in the region and making it more difficult for people to access basic food nutrition. And so that leads me to my to this paradox that while the continent is producing quite enough of food, the prices go up. And so the causes of this is the attribution of this price surge has been largely attributed to escalating oil and natural gas markets. So there seems to be a link between the food sector and the energy sector, which has been causing increased prices because of transport and fertilizer cost, which is crucial for farming, even for most of these food secure countries. And so it would be great if you could walk us, Your Excellency, into the Malawi experience of that crisis, and if you could share your insight in addressing the energy security concerns for the population, balancing social and environmental sustainability in this context. Thank you.
Once again, good morning. My name is Ibrahim Matola, Minister of Energy from Malawi. Malawi is in the southern part of Africa, in the east, bordering Mozambique, and in the west, bordering Zambia, and in the north, bordering Tanzania. In brief, I can say Malawi is a land-linked country. Let me thank the organizers of this MEDays edition, where it is highly patronage of His Majesty, King Mohammed the Sixth, where we have to learn a lot of experiences which has taken Morocco that far. And also my colleagues who will be taking the floor, coming from different parts of the world. The main issue I can start with is that there is a proverb which says, Al-yadu wahidu la tusaffaq. One hand cannot clap. We need collaboration when we want to achieve the sustainable development goals outlined by us, not the United Nations, because we are part of the member states of the United Nations. So when we are setting these goals, and then we put also time limits, some of them, yes, they're very ambitious, can be achieved. Some cannot achieved because 2030 is just tomorrow. 7 years from today. And even half of these goals have not been achieved. Energy is the driver of the economy. We can talk about food security. Africa is so blessed with abundant rainfall. But we cannot only depend on rain-fed agriculture. Time has come where we need to graduate from a peasant farmer to a commercial farmer. But when we are talking about commercialization of agriculture, it surrounds access to electricity, energy issues. Hence, most of sub-Saharan Africa, like Malawi, is agro-based economy. but we depend on rain-fed. We need to compete with other regions by giving more accessibility and affordability, sustainability of energy. When energy is not there, then other issues fall apart. What we need at the time is that let's not leave anyone behind. I'll give an example of Morocco or the Middle East, where you could not think about that they can be planting anything. It's a barren land. It's a desert. But today, because of they have embraced and investing a lot in the generation of power. Farmers should have access to fertilizers, where I'm very glad that Morocco is part of one of the biggest producers of fertilizers in Africa, or number 3 in the world. What we need is to share these resources, because Africa still have a lot of untapped resources. By engaging ourselves, investing a lot in technologies, investing a lot in education, so that we can have smart agriculture. But when we are not investing a lot in technology and innovations, we can't compete with other regions in terms of our food security, even within ourselves. A farmer can harvest, let's say, pineapples. The road network is very bad for him or for her to take those farm produce to the market. Hence, the truck gets broken down on the way, and all of his pineapples get rotten. Next year, he will not have any opportunity of growing such fruits. But when we have electricity, and then we can give them the cold storage with affordable electricity, sustainable electricity, reliable electricity, the producing and the canning of those fruits can be done at the doorstep. And then we can compete. And then these farm produce can be sent to other parts of the world, enhance getting forex and running smooth the economies of our country. So sub-Saharan Africa is being marginalized because lack of proper mechanism. Even if we are talking about mega farms, like what my president, His Excellency Dr. Razas Makati Chakwera, has embarked on, having mega farms. But these mega farms cannot come to realization when we don't have electricity. And then we go back to the old days of peasant farmers. And peasant farmers, they are only trying to do the food security within the household, but also waiting for the rain once in a year. Yet, if we have irrigation systems, we can cultivate more than 3 times in a year, plus the 4th one, including the rain-fed agriculture. The ultra poor in the continent will remain when we work in isolation. What we need is that those who have the resources in energy resources can share with other member states within the region, so that when we have abundant electricity can be shared through the international interconnectors. For example, in the Southern Africa we have Southern Africa Power Pool, and then in the East we have Eastern Africa Power Pool. In West Africa there is Western Africa Power Pool, and in the North, Northern Africa Power Pool. These power pools, if they are really coordinating and working together, we can export power, because Africa has got a lot of resources, especially green energy. There is a lot of sun, a lot of wind, a lot of geothermal, and a lot of rivers which are flowing and pouring the water into the oceans. So these are the resources God given, but we are not utilizing them accordingly. So the regional integration is very important, so that we can minimize the vulnerability of our citizens in Africa by sharing the resources. As I've said, no man is an island. Time has come. As a global village, we need to work hand in hand so that we can reduce the prices of the fuel, fertilizers, energy, but also we can reach the target and give the access to electricity to the many poor people in the rural and peri-urban areas. So, in all, knowledge sharing, technologies and diversification in the energy sector, and the development of energy storage technologies is very important. I'm very glad that what I have seen here, and also sharing with the other speakers during my stay, during this MEDays, it has given me an eye-opener that when there is a collaboration within the member states, Africa can feed itself, but also Africa can feed the whole world. I can rest at the moment if there are questions, and then I'll take them over. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for, yes, a round of applause, for so eloquently framing this sovereignty matter for the continent, for Sub-Saharan Africa. I think that gives us a wonderful introduction to the topics and to the next speaker's engagement today. Our next speaker is Mrs. Carola Ramon. She is currently the Vice President of CARI, and she has extensive experience in foreign affairs and foreign policy in Argentina and in the region. And my question to you, Mrs. Ramon, is from your experience, from your extended experience in foreign affairs, what strategies do you recommend for countries seeking energy sovereignty in the context that His Excellency Mr. Matola expressed just a minute ago?
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. It's always a pleasure to be here and to share thoughts with colleagues. I was at the plenary session, and that's why also I apologize for being a bit late. And we were just talking about trends like de-risking and decoupling. And one of the things that I mentioned was that I think countries of the South, or the so-called global South, I call it so-called because I'm not very comfortable with the global South thing. I don't think it's as global as as it should. But let's say the global South. I think it's about time that our countries in the global South, such in Africa and Latin America, perhaps it's time to de-risk from the so-called global North, and particularly in areas such as food security and energy security, we have so much to bring to the table. But it's very difficult for us because more often than not, we don't have the financial means to do it ourselves. But I think that's the way forward, to be able to together become new important actors in this new world with new energy. The transition to new energies is definitely a political decision that will make our countries be part of the new economy or remain backward. So we are at a pivotal time in this sense. The current crisis and the geopolitical tensions, together with the war in Ukraine, have made this moment more crucial than ever. But when you look at the trends worldwide, investments in clean energy are soaring. Since 2020, they've increased by 40%. That's about $1,000 million per day is allocated to the implementation of solar energy. The increase in this demand obviously has to do, first of all, to comply with Paris agreements and the commitments that many countries have taken, but also to this issue of securitization and diversifying suppliers. And I think that's where our countries have a lot to gain, to be able to position ourselves as as reliable suppliers of energy, and I extend that to food as well. In the case, for instance, of Argentina, where I come from, we are thinking a lot about the potential of hydrogen. As it's been just said, we have also a lot of sun and a lot of wind, so the potential for hydrogen production is enormous. We do need the investments, though, and you see there's a lot of projects announced, but mainly it's been in the industrialized countries, like tax credit for production of hydrogen in the US, some other projects in the European Union and the UK hydrogen business model. Now, what we're doing in Argentina, and a little bit of our experience, we have a hydrogen promotion law since 2006 and a renewable energy law since 2016. We have now a hydrogen plan, and we're about to pass a hydrogen law. So this is the first step as to have the legal aspect, the starting point to be able to attract investments. Now, we are also dealing with strategic alliances to finance some of these investments. But also, apart from private investment, it's very important to consider international financing, and therefore the role of multilateral fora in this sense and multilateral banks is essential. And why is it essential? Because particularly our regions are always in some sort of physical or financial vulnerability. So we need to be able to channel the necessary funds to all economies, not only the economies that are doing better, and they're already transitioning to greener economies. Because the problem we're facing, and let's be honest, is that we are all, in Latin America and Africa, we're all environmental creditors. We haven't been polluting the world because we haven't developed yet. So historically, we're not responsible for all the greenhouse emissions. But what happens today is that when you look at the reports from OECD, there was a recent report, I think last week, that 50% of emissions are belong to 8 chains, and one of them is food production. So we haven't been polluting the world for all these many years, but now we're one of the main responsibles, food production. So if we want to focus on food security and energy security all around the world, the funds need to be channeled to the areas where is more potential for food production and energy production. And those areas happen to be in the global south. So that's where the international community should focus the research and the funding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Ramon, for reminding everyone also that the global south is not environmentally. That the countries in the global south are not environmental creditors. Yes, they are creditors. They're not. Yeah, you understood me. So our next speaker is joining us from the Gulf countries, and it would be really wonderful to hear the perspective from the Gulf countries about energy security. He's Mr. Al Abdullah Ibrahim, Executive Director of the Bahrain Center for Strategic International and Energy, and we will hear you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. And I'd like to thank also Amadeus Institute for inviting us to be part of this event. Personally, this is my second time taking part in this conference since last year. So I'm really looking forward to a fruitful discussion today. With regards to the question, I think it's a very interesting question that you had asked, and I would like to answer it and also give you an example of working together on energy and providing energy and the provision of energy at in the GCC. Now, first of all, with regards to the global energy landscape, it's undergoing significant transformations, presenting both prospects and challenges for countries in terms of energy and also raw materials. As nations strive for economic and energy development, they must also navigate the complex dynamics of sovereignty, independence, and integration, which is something that I'll be discussing today. And also, I'd like to give an overall example of it in the GCC. Now, this delicate balance requires careful consideration of various factors to ensure sustainable growth and also resilience. One of the key global prospects in the energy sector is the shift towards renewable energy and energy resources or sources. The increasing adaptation of renewable presents also opportunities for countries to reduce their dependence on fossil fuels and mitigate environmental impacts. Investing in renewable energy technologies can not only enhance energy security, but also drive economic growth through the development of new industries and also job creation. However, the transition to renewables also possesses a lot of challenges. Countries heavily reliant on fossil fuel exports may face economic risks as the demand for traditional energy sources also declines. So here's the thing, one of the key factors that we need to focus on currently and also in the future is the diversification strategies. So we need to diversify the sources of energy that we produce and also that we provide locally. So it became sort of a crucial way to such risks and ensure a smooth energy transition. Another challenge is the availability and access to raw materials necessary for energy technologies, such as lithium for batteries and or rare, earth materials, and also wind turbines. So ensuring a stable supply chain while avoiding undue dependence on a signal source or region is also very, very essential. Countries can also address this challenge through responsible sourcing practices, which is resource diversification, and fostering also partnerships for sustainable energy resources and production. Uh, Now, there's a delicate balance between sovereignty, independence, and also integration, which is, something that we would like to also discuss, and I also like to provide you an example with. So, while energy independence is often seen as a priority for national security reasons, complete isolation can also hinder economic development. Also, collaborative regional integration can offer benefits as increased energy diversification, shared infrastructure, and economies of scale. Now, here's an example that I would like to also provide you with. We have in the GCC, the GCC Energy Interconnection Energy Authority. Now, this authority, which is derived from the GCC General Secretariat, the Gulf Cooperation Council for the Arab States of the Gulf, it's responsible for the overall energy connection and electric connection between all GCC members, and has played a significant part over the last few years. And what it does is it's sort of like, if there's a blackout in one area, or a serious major blackout in one area, the supply comes from another country to cover that area. So it has played an integral part in the GCC, and lessen the effects of major blackouts. And now there is even talk and discussions of extending the authority's services to other neighboring countries. Nevertheless, countries must also safeguard their sovereignty and protect their national interest. This includes maintaining control over critical energy infrastructure. So there has to be a careful balance between integration and sovereignty. So it's essential to maximize benefits while also limiting the risks. So also, countries must adopt a comprehensive approach. This includes implementing supportive policy frameworks that encourage investment in renewable energy, promoting research and development in energy technologies, and also fostering international collaborations to address common challenges. And one of the things that we are looking into is also artificial intelligence and its role in promoting such activities, and looking into sort of working on an interconnection way with other GCC states. And also, I'd like to point out is the investment in human capital and capacity building is also quite important. So collaborative efforts can also facilitate technology transfer, promote best practices by the formation of organized groups or establishments addressing shared challenges such as climate change and also resource management. In conclusion, the global prospects and challenges in energy and raw materials require countries to strike a delicate balance between sovereignty, independence, and integration. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim, for providing this very interesting Gulf perspective on energy security. And I'm sure we'll have some time in this session for discussing the links between the Gulf countries and the cooperation with other countries in the region, and much broader. That leaves me to my next speaker, who's joining us from Czech Republic, so Central Eastern European region. And it would be very interesting to hear how the country Czech Republic, in the context that we all know of, is navigating the challenges of energy security, how the country is approaching this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here among such distinguished speakers, and also thanks to the organizers for this magnificent event. Of course, to answer your question, it was difficult. It is difficult, and I would also like to address why we are living in the times of increased energy prices, which, as other speakers pointed out, lead to increased food insecurity and food prices. The answer is that there is simply more demand for gas and oil than there is supply. Why? There are large quantities of, for example, gas in northwest of Russia, which is essentially trapped there. It used to be delivered to Europe via pipelines, but Russia has no capacity to export it as in form of LNG to the global market. So there's not enough supply of gas. And why is the gas trapped there? It was the decision of Russia not to deliver, not to follow the contracts in place with European customers. And they conditioned the flows, the continuation of the flows, so that Europe looks away while Russia engages in unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine. And we did not fulfill this condition. In my country, in Czechia, we used to source 96% of gas from Russia. Now we are sourcing zero. We look to the global markets and find the demand there. Now, of course, in times when we need to decarbonize fast as international community, and we need to secure affordable prices of energy for our peoples, we would very much like to invest all the investments we've made to the construction of new LNG terminals and new infrastructure to bring this global LNG to our market into decarbonization projects. But the reality is such that we simply lost almost 100% of our gas supplies. In a way, this change has significant impact on our societies. We in Europe took for granted that the energy is always available at the turn of a pipe or a tap, and now our societies also felt that energy something which Africa and other continents have felt for a long time, that energy is not granted, energy security is not granted. Now I think we took two large lessons. This was one, and the other, the experience of the society that security has cost, an extra cost, will translate to other aspects of securing our supply chains when investigating other dependencies, such as on critical materials and other raw materials. Now, to be a bit more specific as to what are the trends in contemporary energy, I think that we will see less pipeline projects, less fixed infrastructure such as pipelines, because they create dependencies, long-term dependencies, and in the current geopolitical context, this is much more difficult to rely on a partner for such a long period of time. You will need to carefully select these partners and friends from which you would source the materials. Furthermore, these pipelines, this infrastructure is very much vulnerable, not only on land, but also offshore, undersea infrastructure. In Europe, we've seen in the last year 2 major attacks on gas infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. And the attacks can be carried out by militant groups, non-state actors, but also by state actors. So that's why I think that there will be less projects such as Nigal. I think no one now will be going forward with the Trans-Saharan pipeline. Unfortunately, I hope our Moroccan guests will take it well, but I'm a bit skeptical to the West African pipeline from Nigeria to Morocco. But we see it elsewhere in the world too. China is dragging their feet and is reluctant to construct the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline from Russia to China, because of course it would create a dependency on Russia, and that's why they are hesitant. And the last point I would like to make is again something which may not come as new to most people present here, most guests, most attendees, but it's a new for us in Europe. So that is the leadership of state in energy. I think we were mistaken in Europe that we left the task of securing energy needs of our peoples in hands of purely or mostly in hands of corporations, private corporations and markets. And in fact, this past year has taught us that no, there needs to be leadership of state, and I think there will be more leadership of state in the years to come. Investment screening, outbound investment screening, sorry, and leadership in domestic investments. With that, I would yield the rest of my time for the benefit of the whole panel, so that we have time to address any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ujwal. With you, we are moving away from European mistakes being made and the importance of decreasing our dependencies, as you explained it with the pipelines and the situation with Russia. To our next speaker from France, Monsieur Thierry Lepère, we will be exploring with you the possibility of a new kind of energy that is much less reliant on fossil fuel energy supplies, and will maybe show us that there are other alternatives to what we are currently using. So just as a reminder, you're the founder and the president of Ideal, a platform that enables the production and the delivery of green hydrogen in Europe. And with that, I leave you the floor.
I would like to thank my neighbor, Mr. Ujwal, to frame the issue of energy security. And we in Europe are traumatized. We're traumatized because we've depended on that long-term supply for decades, and that supply of 40% of our energy needs, not just gas, but also oil and coal, vanished from one day to another. And there's a word right now in Europe is say, don't trust. Don't trust Russia. Don't trust Africa. Don't trust anybody. Only trust ourselves. And the consequence of that, we're already seeing it in Europe. Energy prices have skyrocketed. Industrial firms are moving away from the country. Growth is at a standstill. Citizens are grumbling. That is the price of mistrust. Now, I'd like to speak on behalf of a country which is not present around the table. It's not France. It's a country which gave me my quote-unquote passport. It was not a real passport, but for COP27 last year. It's Mauritania. Mauritania is an interesting place. It's a place that has nothing to lose and everything to win from trust. It's a country which has twice the size of France. That's a population which is smaller than the city of Casablanca, and which today has a GDP per capita which is a fraction of that of Morocco. And yet, if anybody's pessimistic, I invite you to go to Nouakchott, as I have in the last months and years, and it's a place where the future is happening. So what is happening in Mauritania? Well, first, fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, the bad word, is being developed. In a couple of months, gas will flow from the GTA offshore field towards Europe and towards Mauritania, hopefully as well, and will help Mauritania's GDP to grow, hopefully by 20% next year, which is a good start for a country that starts from nothing. But that's not the end of the story. And by the way, the Mauritanians depend. They depend on BP, they depend on off-takers, they depend on others. And it's okay to depend on others, to trust others. But they're moving one step beyond in a fascinating way. Over the last 2 years, the government of Mauritania has signed 80 gigawatt of agreements with 4 major consortiums, including BP, Total, and a few others. The vision is simple. Gas is a transition. The real thing is hydrogen. Hydrogen from solar and wind, which is abundant in Mauritania. By the way, it's even more abundant here in Morocco. And which will be used in Mauritania. Just a couple of months ago, ArcelorMittal signed an agreement with the Mauritanian government for the construction of a 1 billion euro steel plant in Nouadhibou. Nouadhibou happens to be the port where the iron ore produced in central Mauritania is being shipped right now to the rest of the world. The plan is to use that hydrogen, which will replace coking coal in the production of steel, and steel, to produce steel, to have one of the largest steel plants in the world built in Mauritania. But that's not the end of it. A pipeline. Yes, a pipeline. You're saying a pipeline is dangerous. Well, life is dangerous as well, by the way. Neighbors are dangerous. And we in Europe should know that if Africa doesn't develop, we're not going to be safe. And this idea of a fortress Europe is a short-sighted, very sad insular vision of that. And I would say that, unfortunately, my own government, French government, is paramount in that very sad vision, which is right now leading most French companies to leave Africa. French companies are going away. Good news is that some good people from Morocco are stepping in, but that's not a good news. Now, the good news is that there is a plan, and we're working together with some of those major companies, some of the transmission operators from Europe who need the stuff, who need that hydrogen. And by the way, the European Commission has said we want to import 10 million tons of hydrogen, green hydrogen by 2030. How is it going to come from? Well, good question. Pipelines could help. And we're working on this project, a pipeline project, which is a green hydrogen organization with several companies, with the support of the Mauritanian government, support of the European Union as well. And the idea is very simple, is that if you build an infrastructure like this, you will make it possible for Mauritania to implement its dream of hydrogen. Now, I will tell you what the people in Mauritania dream of. If you have that pipeline, you'll be able to finance the 80 gigawatts. And by the way, if you don't have the pipeline, no investment will come. You know, Mauritanian risk is not something that banks are happy with. Having counterparties in Europe that will be the basis for this long-term project financing will be fundamental. Now, I'll tell you the vision they have. You call that a crazy vision. Country today has 5 million people. They're seeing themselves as 20 million with migrants. Migrants from Europe, migrants from Africa to build a country. They're seeing themselves as the next Gulf, a cleaner version, if I may say, of the Gulf. And yes, they want to develop agriculture as well. They have plenty of arable land, but it's desert. What do you need? Water. Desalinated water will be brought by those hydrogen plants. We need water to produce hydrogen, and that water will come from the ocean through desalination. And by the way, the cost of water for hydrogen is just a few percentage points, so we can subsidize and turn our industry into a water-positive industry. Fertilizers. What can you do with hydrogen? You can produce ammonia, you can produce fertilizers. Now imagine, this is 20 years from now, you have greeneries all around in the desert. 20 million people who, instead of drowning in the Mediterranean, have found jobs in Nouadhibou and other places. And yes, All of this will take a pipeline. So energy sovereignty, energy security, I'll be polite. No, thank you. We need energy solidarity. This idea that the world is built on mistrust is a horrible idea that we're paying very dearly. Right now, Africa should lead. Africa has the potential to show the way. And I'm talking to Africans and I will say, Europe needs you, needs your leadership, needs you to say, we are trusting you and our development will start in Africa, but will benefit Europe in many ways. So long live the Africa-Europe partnership.
Thank you so much, Monsieur Lebec, for this very eloquent phrasing of how much we need energy solidarity, and that's, according to you, the way to go. Our next speaker is Mr. Mehmet Oguchu. Chairman of the London Energy Club and a Global Resources Partner from the UK, joining us from the UK. And would be great to hear you reflect on maybe some of the things you've heard, or explain to us how you see private-public partnerships play a role in achieving this diversification and sustainability of the energy mix for the countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Claire. I would like to congratulate you for the energy solidarity. I think this is the key word. To what extent we can achieve this is another thing, of course. But it's amazing. People around this table, my fellow speakers, coming from Malawi to Bahrain, from France to Czech Republic, Turkey, UK, Argentina. I think we speak the same language on energy, but from different perspectives. And yes, the day before yesterday, we talked about energy sustainability, green growth, and I don't want to repeat what we said there. I would like to make 5 key points in the next 5 minutes, if you allow me, including on your question, public-private partnership. One is, we talk so much about energy independence, energy sovereignty. It's impossible to achieve this. Even if you have 100% domestic production of energy, still you need finance for energy, technology for your energy. You need to be involved with your climate change obligations. So we are in an interdependent world, no matter to what degree you import or export your energy flows. That's one point. Of course, it creates vulnerabilities, weaknesses, being dependent on another source, like we experienced Russia-Europe case. Now, our colleague from Czech Republic said that from almost 100% came down to 0. The same with Ukraine. Also, things are evolving so fast in our world, because we thought that Russian economy will collapse when you have the sanctions against Russian natural gas and the crude. Didn't happen. What we had was trade diversion. All the crude going to the direction of Europe now is going all the way to China and India and Turkey at heavily discounted prices. This was a bonus also to economic recovery in many countries. Still, EU, despite all these bans and sanctions, are importing huge amount of LNG from Russia and other products. And also we talk so much about oil, gas, renewables, what we have, but we also have another element now in our energy security or insecurity, critical minerals, lithium, cobalt, nickel. These are as strategically important as oil and gas in the future because we use them in space industry, in electrical vehicles, and what you name, in almost every areas. So this is a new element. Also, energy security. I used to work in the IEA. Our organization was created back in 1974 when there was this oil crisis for oil security. Now we talk not only about supply security, but we talk about also demand security. We talk about investment security in critical geographies, financial security, transit security, but also, not so much discussed, I think, in this forum as well, cybersecurity. Since we digitalize our energy systems, and we are vulnerable to critical attacks coming from cyber criminal organizations. So we have to think about it, how we can ensure cybersecurity will also be protected. Then, in addition to energy solidarity, I want to mention also energy democracy. Now, some stakeholders in the energy world are making very important decisions, impact investments. You know, young generation are thinking differently from our generation of fossil fuels. They say we want green investment. Unless you do so, you will be out of our market, or you won't have access to financial resources, like EU Green Deal. Also, for the first time in China, where I spent most of my professional career, now the protest against environmental degradation is so strong. In Turkey, villagers are against the wind turbines because they are built close to human settlements. And also similar, I think, actions are taken everywhere. So we have to take into account energy democracy in our calculations in many ways. And climate change, we only think about it in the sense that, well, you know, energy is the main source of carbon emissions. But vice versa, climate change, changes in climate, affect our energy system, stress our infrastructure, pose a threat to safety of our people. So it's vice versa, working two ways. That's the reason why we need to achieve meaningful progress in COP28 and beyond. Is it going to happen? The intelligence I have from the meetings we organized at London Energy Club, there isn't much progress to be made in, unfortunately, Dubai in the next few weeks. There will be a lot of talk, rhetoric, but in terms of concrete finance going to least developed countries, it's good to talk about targets, but how this is going to be achieved in Africa and in other parts of the world. Here comes the question of $2.8 trillion of investment in the global energy sector. Where will money come? People say money is not an issue. There is money, a lot of money. Where is there? Where is it? It's not moving in the right direction. So we need to unlock it. I think that's the key question. And private money will not flow to risky geographies for investment. You need to have government money, local money, international bodies, funds. Then the private sector will come to work together in public-private partnerships. So you need to improve investment climate for this as well. Give me another 3 hours, I will continue. And so we are all on the same boat. No doubt about this. And if it sinks, we will all be drowned. That's clear. I mean, 2023 was the hottest year in recent history. It's going to get worse and worse. But are we awakening to this fact? Taking real measures rather than lip service? No. The companies are not doing it as much as they should do. Governments are not doing it. And international conferences, yes, it should continue. COP28, COP29, small steps, but ocean in the drop. I think on energy solidarity, there is much to be done beyond rhetoric. And last point, if I may, one size doesn't fit all for all. Because even in EU, you have France. It was 75%, now 63% or less. Nuclear. Poland, coal country. Malta, Greece. How could you compare them and work together in one 27 country? In Africa, countries are different in terms of their resource endowment and priorities. You talk about the green growth, cleaner technologies, but it doesn't mean much for the people. 900 million people in Africa. They don't have access to commercial energy. They don't care about the carbon emissions. They want to have electricity. So I think these are the critical issues we have to bear in mind and follow a harmonious international effort. I hope that the meeting in San Francisco between Xi Jinping and Biden could help a little bit to this process, because we are all scared about hot confrontation, very hard rhetoric between the two major powers. polluting the environment and making progress more and more difficult. We hope that there will be more collaboration than confrontation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Agutsu, for echoing what Monsieur Lepec has said also before, and our colleague from Czech Republic about the energy solidarity, but also the need to go beyond the rhetoric and make it happen. Hopefully that's something that we can explore with our next speaker, coming from the World Economic Forum, director for the MENA region there, Mr. Mahoun Karouz. You've heard a lot about the other speakers talking about financial security and investment to support this energy, the energy needs and diversifying and so on and so forth. A question that I have from our last speaker is, how do we get there? How do we mobilize, and how do we make sure that we can invest? Could you elaborate on the context, first of all, the geopolitical context and the tensions in the region that you oversee, and the impact on the stability of energy supplies? Thank you.
First, thank you, Claire. And first, I want to pick up on something Ms. Ramon was saying. We see a growing wedge between the whatever you want to call it, global north, global south, so-called developing. We see a global wedge on many issues. Security is one. The war in Ukraine is an illustration. And energy is another. But it's also important to keep something in mind. Even though the region I oversee, the Middle East and North Africa, is a net creditor in terms of emissions, it is one of the worst affected by climate change. It is warming at twice the global rate, the global average. And on current trends, it means by 2050, our region is going to be, in average, 4 to 5 degrees warmer than it is today. Imagine that for a second. So the first important point that we have to make is that we have an invested interest by ourselves, without anyone telling us what to do, in moving to doing the energy transition, moving to a greener energy supply, because the next generation demands it. We are going to be affected worse than the rest of the world. Now that said, each region has its different pathway to doing that. And how do we implement it? Yes, there are responsibilities on governments and on the private sector. But as we do that, we have to keep in mind, as Minister Matola was saying, it involves trade-offs. 2022 was the first year on record where the number of people without access to electricity has actually increased. So how do we make this transition happen in a way that we are not leaving anyone behind? And when you see countries in the developed world faced with energy shocks reverting back to coal, it doesn't surprise you that some of the low-income, middle-income countries feel a little bit hardly done by when they see these reactions. And working together is key, as you mentioned, Mr. Lepere. I don't think realistically we can wall ourselves off. But coming back to responsibilities of governments in the Middle East and North Africa specifically, some aspects involve trade-offs. Let's not be naive about it. If you're going to move quickly, there are costs. That said, there are things we can do that are low-hanging fruits. One example, and I want to keep it short, is subsidies to fossil fuels. The region still, despite many efforts made by countries like Morocco, Egypt, in the Gulf, still spends $500 billion a year on subsidies to fossil fuels, which are both ineffective and regressive in terms of their distribution effects to the population. So that should be easy to do away with. That's a quick win if you have in place the right alternative to mitigate the social impact. Another aspect that is important to mention is, if the private sector is the engine of the economy, it also has to shoulder its responsibilities in terms of also being the savior of the economy when it comes to greener growth. And to give you an idea, in the Middle East, only 12% of companies have made net zero commitments. That compares to around 40% in India and Southeast Asia. Not to say we don't have companies that are pioneers, front runners. You look at Masdar, you look at Aqua Power, for example. These are really at the forefront of what can be done on renewable energy. But that needs to also cascade to the remaining companies in the region that are lagging a bit behind and that need to go to move a bit faster there with the support of their governments. One last point to make, and it's very relevant for this region, because the narrative in many other countries was we need to withdraw from the region, it's too problematic, the concentration of oil and gas, diversifying the energy supply chain, as you mentioned. And as Mr. Mohammed was mentioning, moving to a greener supply chain does not necessarily mitigate energy security risks, because the new energy supply chains are at least as concentrated as the old ones. If you look at cobalt, if you look at rare earths, if you look at lithium, if you look even at the production of solar technology, it's as concentrated, if not even more so, than a lot of the fossil fuel supply chains. So again, to sum up, it does involve trade-offs. There are no simple solutions. And that's something that governments, private sector need to engage the citizenry in a fact-based debate that is not subject to domestic politics of various countries. And in the region, our culture is to, we work all of our lives to give our kids better than what we have. And if we don't do it on the level of saving the planet, that won't make any sense. There's no purpose in it. So overall, I'm optimistic that the region can move in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carouse, for reminding us of the alter motive for everyone to make this a better place for future generation. Our next speaker is a professor at Sciences Po Paris, a young professor of global food politics, Mr. Chris Hagedorn. It would be a great opportunity coming back to the supply chains, the food supply chains, to hear your thoughts about how can we have enough food security given this context of the price of energy going up and the agriculture that we use in most countries that is heavily reliant on fossil fuel based inputs. How do we reconcile the importance of growing the demand and the supplies for food while reducing our dependency on fossil fuel based inputs? And more generally, the question of the food politics intersecting with the energy security concerns that we've heard today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Claire. Very happy to be back in Tanger, to have the opportunity to be participating in this really impressive panel and to be enjoying the beauty of this country. So thank you all for spending time with us this morning. Talk about a very complex topic. My background is diplomacy. I spent about 30 years in the US government as a diplomat, working on development and also here in the region. And I just left Rome, where I had worked for the UNFAO as a director leading the Secretariat of the Committee on World Food Security. So food security, and food systems are my passion and what I'm interested in talking about today, as you suggested. We are in a global crisis. I don't need to tell everybody that. I think it's pretty obvious. We are heading to Dubai in 2 weeks' time, and we're in a race against time. 1.5, remaining within 1.5 degrees Celsius is not a nice to have. This is a global race against time. And yes, this is the world we're handing our children, Murun. And it doesn't make me happy as a father. And I think we all need to act, not just as government ministers and business leaders, but as individuals. And the decisions we take as individuals are every bit as important as what our governments do in Dubai. Now, the food system is a big contributor not only to greenhouse gas emissions, whether those are CO2 or methane, nitrous oxide as well. There are over a third of greenhouse gases come from our food system. That has to change. The world recognizes this. We're making progress on moving from a discussion on food security to food systems that encompass the externalities that our food systems are creating in terms of damage to the environment, damage to biodiversity, and damage to human health, as non-communicable diseases are now the #1 killer in the world. So energy is a big part of this. It's estimated that food systems consume about 20% of fossil fuels. So a conversation in Dubai at the Conference of the Parties of the UNFCCC cannot move forward without a very clear-headed discussion around food systems. And that has taken years and years and years to get where we are, and it's still quite small. We'll see if the Emiratis can push that conversation forward. That's the plan. I'll be there with many of you, pushing to elevate the issue of food system transformation towards genuine sustainability. And what that will require is a genuine transition to renewable energy sources, not just the fertilizers, but throughout the entire value chains. Now, one way to do that, and as I said earlier, it's not just governments, it's not just ministers, but that's a big part. We need leadership from the top down, but at individual level, it can also have big impacts. Perhaps, Minister, you have seen the film, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind in Malawi. It's a great example of a food crisis that can be mitigated through fairly simple technologies, simple assistance, social safety nets, and the recognition that the climate is changing incredibly fast and we need to act. It's a good reminder that the way we grow and produce food can also be combined with renewable energy transition. And one of those ways that I'm very interested in, I'm teaching about it, but more interested in getting into actual business, is agrivoltaics, which is the combination of food production with solar panels. And that can be configured in many different ways. It can be used, solar panels, to pump water, to create cold storage chains, to eliminate food waste. It can be solar panels covering irrigation to preserve water resources. But it's also a way, particularly in a country like Morocco, in a region of North Africa, where climate change is already having major impacts on productivity, nutritional content of food production. And so why aren't we applying a technology or a combination of technologies where you can harvest the sun while growing food under panels where you're producing equal or higher volumes of food and saving water resources, protecting the soil, and protecting the livelihoods of the farmers who we all depend on for those food resources. So that's something I'd like to see, and I'd love to see a government minister take this on, whether it's in Malawi or Mauritania. I think it's a perfect, you said they want to develop agriculture. Well, are they doing it in a siloed manner in which their energy people are not talking to their food people, who are not talking to their health people? That's got to change. And so I'd love to talk to you more about that. But we all have to figure out where the policy, what we can do to change the policy conversation and to facilitate the kind of funding that it will take to make these transitions. It's not easy, and the risk is big, right? And we just heard from Mohammed that private capital is probably not going to be the first in line to take those risks. right? This is where multilateral banks, this is where foundations can de-risk some of those investments and draw in the bigger money from the private sector. We know it has to happen. We are over the limit on 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries that are measured. This is a future that I'm not happy to be handing off to my children. I think we all need to act very, very fast, and we need to figure out ways to combine that energy conversation with the food conversation, with the health conversation, with the biodiversity conversation, and don't take no for an answer, okay? Yeah, it's not enough to say, to talk about it. It's not enough to say, okay, somebody else is gonna handle this, so not my responsibility. That's what I'm hoping everyone listening, particularly the young people here and around the world who want a better future, who want a job, who are excited by the concepts of innovation, digital agriculture, digital technologies. This is where the future is. This is where we need those energies. And whether it's in the fossil fuel, the fertilizer components, we need to move away from fossil fuels. We need to move quickly to renewables, and we all need to take a very active part in helping that transition happen. So thank you, Claire, and appreciate the invite to be here.
Thank you very much, Professor, for for shedding light on the global food supply chain politics. I have a direct follow-up question on de-risking, but I'll keep it for after our last speaker, Mr. Maxime Seneco. Thank you for joining us. So you're an ESG expert and sustainable finance director at Solway Investment Group, and in this panel, in this very impressive panel today, we've heard a lot about the need for the transition. And with you, we'd love to explore the types of transitions that you see, and maybe to be a bit more specific on the time frames and on the elements it takes, understanding that there is no, as we said before, no one size fits all, but every country has a very different context and different assets. And so from a private sector perspective, what barriers do you see are maybe hindering those transitions, and what do countries need to take in account when it comes to designing their transition? Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. So, good morning, everyone. Today I'm coming as an ESG expert, but I've developed this expertise being a banker before, doing project finance in Africa, and seeing my clients constrained in the mining sector, oil and gas sector, and the various infrastructure and energy. And I'm seeing a lot of young faces today, so I will start with this. I read this morning that students in Paris from the best university, and I will not name them, but the brain of tomorrow, they have decided to not apply for any job to BNP Paribas until that bank stops funding any fossil fuel project. And it just strike me. I'm wondering this brain of the future, and I have a question for them. When you dress up in the morning, do you jump in your trousers both legs together? Or do you put one leg and then another leg? Because this is what we're talking about here, energy transition. And until we have understood that we still need a lot of fossil fuel energy to, power our economies, we will not solve the problem. So yes, we have been going through energy transition through humanity. For the past centuries, we have been evolving from one energy to another. And we are continuing to do that. The only difference today is that this transition is not driven by depletion of resources or market dynamics. It's driven by nature. Nature is sending us a clear signal we are clearly against the wall, and we have only ourselves to blame for it. And the only way, and it was discussed earlier, is about having a platform for discussion. And we discussed earlier about mistrust. And yes, this economy today is it's completely balkanization economy. We don't trust each other. We've moved from an economy of just in time to an economy of just in case, and we just want to be ready for what our neighbor will do, and we can maybe, I don't know, blame part of this because of internet. We see so many fake news and rumors going around that it's very difficult for anybody, any expert on this room, to have a clear idea as to what is going on in the Near East, in the Middle East, between Russia, China, and the US, those superpowers. So we have to sit down and talk. And one example as well was COVID, and some said that there's a lack of capital available. I disagree. There is capital. When we had COVID, we managed to find hundreds of billions of dollars globally to keep us going for 2 years without producing much. So money is available. It's just a political will, and make sure that we drive this money to the right targets. And again, this COVID struck me. I was in London and I saw people fighting in supermarkets over toilet paper. The first reaction was, just in case, I need to have enough paper to survive for the next few weeks. So coming back to my French students, just imagine if you stop producing or financing fossil fuel energy, and luckily Saudi Arabia is putting some stability in the oil price today. But if the price shoot to $300 or $500 tomorrow, I think we're going to start killing each other. And in the same way that I saw my ladies fighting over toilet paper, I think we are facing a major risk if we don't control the energy supply chain. And this exercise of transitioning, and we talk about timing, it doesn't happen overnight. You can't say to BNP, stop, or do, or walk, or look at the Chinese. The Chinese, they're planning their economy over 50 or 100 years. We in Europe, in Western country, we plan the economy over the next 5-10 years. I was a banker before. Investment in Africa, 5 years is called long-term investment. So we need to, and again, it was discussed, multilateral banks, we need to have long-term financing. This cannot come from private sectors. The government has to show the way to invest, to also improve, and that's true in Africa, but in many other countries, improve stability. And that means working on regulatory framework. Make sure that investor coming in any African country have some faith in long-term investment. And I'm not talking about 5 years now. I'm talking about 50 years. Those investors coming start with one project, but they always have in mind 2, 3, 4, 5 projects behind on the line in the pipeline. So this stability comes from legal framework, and make sure that any private money will be secured. And one trend that was also very much discussed, and His Excellency Mr. of Energy mentioned it, the biggest wealth available, now we see it, the biggest wealth is nature. And it's available in abundance. In Africa you have, and Mr. Lepec, is a good example, green hydrogen can be the future. It will not happen today. It will start today, but it will happen in 20 or 30 years. Just like the Kingdom of Morocco invested in wind farm and solar panel 30 years ago, when the technology was not there, when it was very expensive entry ticket, but still the vision was there and it happened. Just like green hydrogen will happen. The question is now, how do you do it and how do you plan for it? Because green hydrogen requires huge amount of logistics. You have to install huge amount of install capacity on wind and solar. And I just came back from Namibia, where they also have huge green hydrogen project there. They are thinking now, you know, how they're gonna procure those electrolyzer that they need for these gigantic projects. And they are asking China to produce them. And if you look at the small project we have all around Africa, in Morocco, in Mauritania, in Egypt, in South Africa, in Namibia, and elsewhere, this will take decades for China to produce those electrolyzers. It will not happen overnight. This will require planning, and planning will start from mining. The two things that we do on a daily basis is coming from the ground, food, and we dig it from the ground one way or another. So that requires a lot of planification and some patience. We have to make sure that we don't shoot ourselves and in the foot, and we don't jump too quickly on the next green phase. And I will never blame any African country who has oil and gas resources to start investing in those, put one leg in the trousers, and then put the second leg in the future. Copper is a good example. We talk about electrification, but electrification comes from simply wire, and those wires are made of copper. They can be made of silver or gold, but that's too expensive, so it is copper. And if you want to electrify Africa or replace the very old copper cable that we have in Europe or in US, it requires a lot of investment in copper mining and some other products. So I think we said a lot. I will leave the floor for some questions, but I'm also hoping that with my ESG head, we will talk about not just climate change, but also the loss of biodiversity. I think it's a very important subject that we tend to be shadowed by climate change. Consequences is that forests are burning across the planet. In Australia, last summer, they've lost billions of animals, reptiles, and species. And I like to say that we are burning the library of the planet. There's so many information, hidden in those biodiversity and ecosystem that we cannot not afford to lose them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Senego. I've seen some reactions with our speakers, so I would like to open the floor to speakers for feedback on some of what has been said.
If I can jump on the how fast. Before being in hydrogen, I was in solar. With Solar Direct, my company, we built the first solar park in France in 2008. Solar was the most expensive source of power in 2008. 5 years later, I inaugurated in Chile with the Chilean Minister of Energy the first merchant solar park, no subsidies. And I told the minister, Mr. Minister, I thank you for not having any subsidies of any kind. Just the market, pure and simple. And he told me you're a real Chilean patriot because you're bringing cheaper, purely Chilean and clean energy to sustain the backbone of our economy, which is mining. 5 years, it lasted 5 years. When I started Solar Direct, the solar industry was a 1 gigawatt per annum industry. Today, it's close to be a 1,000 gigawatt per annum. 1,000 times in a little under 2 decades. And I can tell you, we're spending a lot of time with Chinese companies, and China is going to make it happen. Today, the ramp up of electrolyzer capacity is even faster than what we've seen in solar, or has been the case in wind as well, but in batteries. So yes, there is a big partner here. It's China. And I know that it's not politically current to talk about China these days. And I say, without China, nothing will be done. And actually, we have a triangle to build. That triangle is not just Europe and Africa. That triangle goes with Africa, with China. And yes, we can include the Gulf, which actually sits in the middle. So it has a unique opportunity to be at the heart of that triangle. But let's think about it. Let's leverage on each other. And then again, look at what the Chinese industry has done in solar, in batteries, and is now doing. Let's look at China. And Argentina, interestingly enough, has shown that it's also looking at China joining the BRICS. So it's an interesting sign, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Lebec. Anyone else?
Well, the BRICS is quite controversial among the Argentine presidential candidates, so we'll see this Sunday. One wants to be in, one wants to be out. But in Argentina, as you were saying, long term, it's the end of the week. It's Sunday. We'll see the results of the elections. So anything can happen. I just wanted to add a few things. I've been taking some notes. I absolutely agree with the terms of energy solidarity and energy democracy. I think it's absolutely necessary, and without that, we can't move forward at all, because it happens to all, or it doesn't happen to anyone. It's definitely, like the Chinese say, a win-win situation here. On the other hand, I'm a little bit skeptical, because you mentioned the COVID, and we have seen what happened with COVID, that a lot of countries had loads and loads of vaccines, while others had none. And that was a matter of life and death. So I'm not sure that we need a lot of political muscle to be able to build on this solidarity and this democracy for energy. And I also want to add that, of course, there is the transition is just, it is a transition, as you said. We are thinking green, but we have to think, we say the future is green, but the present is multicolor. We have to think of all the different options. And more often than not, what happens in many talks is that the investments are, well, no, we want green. We don't want invest in anything else, but we need to get there. At the moment, we have to see other colors, gray hydrogen, or whichever other colors there are, because otherwise we're going to end up in a situation where some countries might end up exporting green hydrogen, but then domestically we're still producing like we've always done. So we need to change our productive and infrastructure for good. So we need to look at infrastructure and the size of our countries, the particularities of our countries. As you said, one size doesn't fit all. That's been a horrid concept. It was even horrid for fashion. So it doesn't apply to absolutely anything, the one size fits all. So we need to be able to produce with renewables. We need to be able to transport our goods to our ports in a better way, and we need to export things. Otherwise, we'll be out of market, because the standards are being placed higher and higher all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just want to ask a question about ESG. Recently, I was listening to a talk. It says ESG is everything and nothing at all, because you have so many different definitions, scoring, investment, impact requirements. It's really mind-boggling, and also preventing business from moving ahead. It creates additional bureaucracies. What is the real ESG? Where we should focus?
Thank you. It's a good question. Like I said, today I'm ESG, but yesterday I was a banker, and I finance hundreds of millions of oil and gas projects, mining in dirty way. At the time, things have evolved. And when I see my friends on LinkedIn, everybody has a sustainability angle nowadays. We have to be part of it. And just like Ms. Ramon said, we have no choice. That's the expectation. Investor wants green. So I'm trying to have this granular approach to ESG. I'm currently working for a mining company, and we're trying to improve. And in mining, it's quite easy because it used to be so dirty that room of improvement is there, and it's very possible. It's very possible to, again, through access to cheap and sustainable energy. So in our process, we try to attach the mine to hydropower, which is the most easy source, or sometimes solar. Trying to use electrical yellow trucks, if it's possible, or conveyor belts, which produce energy. So to answer your question, there's 50 shades of ESG, to be fair. And you cannot have this one approach. Like I said with my example, you cannot jump in your trousers. You have to keep your mind open and look at the ground reality. Even in this example of Namibia, they're going to install 5 giga of renewable energy. They have strong wind in Luderitz, where you have this world record of windsurf, so it's an amazing place for that. You also have the desert of Namib, so they have huge access to solar energy. Yet, it's a huge country, and with only twice and half the size of France, less than 5 million people. Obviously, you cannot connect everybody to the grid. It will not be economical, so you have to have those, in some cities, renewable and sometimes non-renewable access, heavy fuel for some of them. If you have, a mining company in a neighborhood, usually they have heavy fuel generation, and they will link the village next door, and I think that's fine. It cannot be green everywhere. Africa is responsible for less than 1% of CO2 emission. We cannot tell them, do what I say, but don't do what I've been doing for the past 100 years. They have the same right as anybody else. And when you see now that China and India, which represent half of our planet, have committed to carbon neutral by 2060 and 2070. So we still have some time before the whole planet comes back to carbon neutral and be ESG friendly in every way.
Thank you very much. I think I can just give you a takeaway from the discussions is that the issues of climate change is real, and it is affecting the energy sector and also the agriculture. I'll give you an example of what happened with the cyclone Anna in 2022 in Malawi. We lost 130 megawatts of power at one of the power stations. And to restore that, it took us a lot of money, but also losing a lot of life. Similarly, to the fields or to the agriculture fields, you wake up in the morning, you find the whole village is gone, swept. And these are the things which I would like to concur with Seneca. That we invest a lot in agriculture, and then due to the climate change, yet most of the African countries are not the polluters. And we are leaving the polluters scot-free, and Recently, in Libya, that's September, there was floods. And in this country, in September, if I'm not mistaken, on the 8th, there was also an earthquake in Marrakesh. So the catastrophes, disasters, which are causing most of the African countries to go backwards. Yet, a journey of 1,000 miles began with a single step. And when we are going backwards, it's not a single step. We need to bang our heads in order to find solutions, especially in the investment of early warning systems. We've been talking and giving world meteorological reports, but nature cannot be controlled. Especially Malawi, that it is along the Madagascar. So whatever hurricane is coming from Madagascar, it passes through Malawi. That's why from Cyclone Idai, Cyclone Gombe, Cyclone Anna, and the last year, this year, it was Cyclone Freddy, which took away a lot of people in Malawi. And up to now, rebuilding, it will take time because most of our states are fragile states. And we need support, not only technical support, but financial support with our own financial institutions, but also with the support from the bilateral and multilateral cooperation or donors and partners. With that, I would like to thank you all for your comments, interventions, and sharing the ideas. But as we go, let's have in mind about the climate change, which is really taking us backwards. I thank you.
Claire, maybe I'm preempting your question. You said something about risk, but that's actually what I wanted to mention as well. While we all, government or individual level, we have responsibilities for both adapting to climate change and mitigating against further change, but what we know is certainly going to happen. There will be more crises, whether it's tomorrow, next year, or further. Maybe there will be another pandemic. Maybe there'll be another series of cyclones and hurricanes, but they're coming. And they're coming at quicker and quicker intervals. So what is certainly incumbent upon those in positions of responsibility, whether it's governments or academia, the World Bank, African Development Bank, whoever, we can plan better for those coming crises. One example, I'm organizing a workshop that is focused in February in Brussels for 60 experts from government, academia, from industry, that will come together to do a simulated food crisis. The scenario is a climate-driven series of supply shocks to the EU food system. And the goal of that two-day workshop will be to examine both the policy and the regulatory frameworks in place, identify gaps, and build a community of practice that can then offer policy recommendations to senior officials in Brussels. There is no reason whatsoever why that can't and shouldn't be done in the energy sector, in the health sector, for Africa, for a country, for a large company that has global supply chain dependency. So apart from the policy shifts that I discussed earlier, we should also be looking at crisis preparedness. And it's not hard to do. but it's surprisingly not done enough. So I just throw that out there as a idea for further consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Actually, this is a very this goes back to my work. I at the World Bank, I work on the diagnostic side, and those scenarios that you were mentioning are being explored by large teams of economists and scientists and policy advisors and so on and so forth, in a very integrated way. It's called a CCDR, a Country Climate Development Reports. I think over 50 have been published this year and last year, and more are coming from different countries. And it's absolutely essential to go back to His Excellency's point on the need for early warning systems. Technology plays a very important role there, but also knowing what to look for is very important. And the diagnostic that the World Bank, the IMF, and all the partners are working on are also a first step to know what to look for in the climate patterns, in the resources availability for each country, and hopefully at as granular level as possible, which would be especially important for the communities in different areas. And the governments are absolutely keen on receiving these policy recommendations. So yeah, food is crucial, and it's number one. We do that 3 times a day, so that's number one. But of course, energy supplies also follow suit, and then that's crucial. I want to open the floor to our other speakers if you have any follow-up comments. We have about 15 minutes left before the end of the session, and the audience is more than welcome to also ask questions to our distinguished speakers. Yes, please. There is a microphone coming to you, yes. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the great presentations. My question is going to be very short. It seems that we are hitting the wall in terms of climate coordination, specifically in terms of climate mitigation. What will that take us to get to an agreement? Is it like in the movie, Don't Look Up? What will be the trigger to make all those countries come together to find a solution? Thank you.
Yes, it's like Don't Look Up. You need people to act in their own interest. I mean, the idea that people are going to act collectively in a collective interest, that is going to show collective leadership in the face of something at the expense of their own interests, is not going to happen. So, I mean, obviously I'm taking the point of view of an industry player. It's up to innovators, it's up to entrepreneurs, it's up to industry, it's up to investors to come up with the solutions. After all, we, industry people, brought this damage in the first place. And no offense to NGOs, governments, etc., they can do nothing. Nothing can be done by governments. Those conferences, by the way, should stop. They're just a waste of time. They're bringing an illusion. And yes, the onus should be put on industry and players that come up with a solution, and come up with a solution fast. But solution for customers. Solution that will attract people, not because you can put constraints on them or add costs. This idea that punishment is the way to solve climate change is not going to happen. People need to find it, and especially here on this continent. Frugality or all these nice things that we talk about in Europe are indecent. We need to talk about abundance, energy abundance. And how do you do that? Because you go to lower cost. And this is where the Chinese approach to things is important. And for us, there's much to be learned in how these things have been done with solar and the rest, because you lower the cost, you make it accessible to everyone, and then people change, not because they want to change the planet, because they want to improve their economic situation. They want to have a better life. And we collectively need to promote and to present a better life to our customers. This is whom I'm talking about. Not just citizens, customers, and customers need to move in, including those customers who are in poverty today and need to have the right offers in terms of energy access and food security.
I will also add something about flow of money. I think I was in Sierra Leone in 15 when Ebola outbreak started, and immediately, you know, you had a story about this nurse in the Nigerian hospital when she realized that this passenger come from Togo had the Ebola, and she locked herself in a room with him and she died with him to prevent the outbreak to reach Lagos. With Ebola, we saw billions of dollars flowing from the west to Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone, just to prevent the disease from spreading and creating worldwide chaos. Just imagine if you have Ebola in New York or London or Paris. So, like I was saying earlier, I think in this energy transition, it's not just resource depletion or innovation in technology that forces us to move to the next energy sources, is nature itself. So I think we don't have, we will not have the luxury of debating who and what and how. The problem will face itself, and we see this already with the fires and the drought. And like you said, Professor, the brainstorming and the simulation we're doing, we see already that if there is shortage of food or energy in Europe, it will be catastrophic. If you have drought in Africa and people start dying, they will move heavily from one country to another, and they will come to the doorstep of Europe for shelter. And this will only be, resolved collectively. I don't think it's a, individual answer. We are in a world which is more and more intertwined and depending on each other. We don't understand what's happening, next door country, but it's coming to us, and we will have no choice but to adapt and provide this solution. There's no one solution fits all, but there will have to be a solution provided by governments. And I tend to agree about the comment around the customer. I think this change is driven by clients, it's driven by the citizens. They want change, and if they decide that they don't want to buy plastic bottle anymore, then the industry will have to replace that with aluminum can, and they will themselves force the governments to move the regulation to satisfy their clients. So it's down to the people to make the right decision.
We have one question in the audience over there. If we can get a microphone, thank you.
Thank you very much. Kennedy is my name. Listening at all the panelists speaking, it's a little bit perplexed because we have two perspectives. Or the other one says, let's take the time, it's multicolor, let's move, it takes time, people should adapt. On the other side, we need to move further. And the Central African states, we decided to come with what is called the Natural Capital Consortium, saying, we want our money, we have the natural resources, and in the Congo basins we supply clean air to the whole climatic debate, and we say we are going to put in a consortium, and if we do not deplete our natural resources, most especially the forest, then that's money already. So I want to ask our colleagues on the table, so what do you think we have to do to raise our money, to finance our development, making sure that the protections of our natural resources provide capital for us to invest in the different facilities we have. The second thing we wanted to do was to the Great Inga Dam. Nobody wants to finance it. Every time we speak, we turn around. Nobody wants to finance the Great Inga Dam that will supply the energy for our people, our industrializations, our villages, and our connectivity. So what do we need to do to match the talks? I love what you said, that, if we go to the next COP, we keep on talking and talking, promising. But those of us on the ground, the entrepreneurs that have a lot of initiative they want to develop, there's no finance for them. So what do we need to do to match the talks with the actions on the ground?
Thank you very much for unpacking what has been discussed here. Regional integration is very, very important. And citing the example of Inga Dam, indeed, the talks of Inga Dam started even before I was born. My take on this is that I've given an example here, or a proverb, that a journey of 1,000 miles began with a single step. The gigawatts which we are expecting to be producing at Inga, let's take them in phases, not holistically. If we have projects of 100, 200, and 300 million US dollars, it will be well accepted to the financiers. Looking at our states, fragile states. And also, we need to open up our legislative and non-legislative reforms in order to attract the investors. But when we are doing these projects as Africa, we need to take them as continental projects, not national projects. Because the systems which we have in our countries, 5 years per administration, 4 years per administration, then this administration has the agenda in the energy sector. Then it stays 4 years in power, and then another administration comes. It will take another 3 years for them also to start showcasing. So our manifestos, political party manifestos, should be reading to each other or corresponding to the national development agenda. In Malawi, we have adopted the Malawi 2063, that any political party comes into system, they will not tamper with the agenda of the country. So most of our countries are going wrong because we are advancing the agenda of particular administration which is in that, on that time. Hence, we are not progressing because the coups are happening, confidence from the voters, and then we go for runoff, or elections are being delayed or called earlier than it was anticipated. So my thinking is that as Africa Union, we need to drive one agenda because we have a financial bank, an African Development Bank. And the African Development Bank is an affiliate of World Bank. So, to get funding within the private sector, and also the governments should put in their budgets the way we do in agriculture. The lion's share goes to agriculture, or the lion's share in the other year goes to education. But I have never heard any African country putting more of the resources from national budget, except Ethiopia. Ethiopia have built their own dam, Renaissance, the biggest dam, through people from the diaspora, but also donations and contributions from the patriotism citizens. We need our people to understand civic education is very, very important. As I've said, that we need to start with our education system. The curriculum should be changed. Instead of teaching our children about how many legs a grasshopper has, how many parts of a frog, if you bisect a frog, who discovered the river Congo, that cannot help the future of our children. But we should put in our curriculums and civic education, and it will minimize even the vandalism. Because most of African countries, we are going backwards because of vandalism. Why? Because we are putting a power plant here, and then the transmission line passes them. And these people within that power station, the village which is just closer, few meters to the power station, they don't have electricity. What do you expect them to do? There is no ownership. They will end up vandalizing. And the electrical equipment is very, very expensive. So we need to safeguard by giving the ownership to those who are surrounding that area, but also civic education that it is us Africans. African problems will be solved by Africans. Yes, we have heard about Namibia. Many European countries have gone to Namibia. How much money they have invested in Namibia? 90 billion because of hydrogen. Is that hydrogen going to assist the Namibians? The answer is, but it is being exported. So we are still going backwards. What we need is that let's safeguard as an Africa, and we move with one voice. Whatever excess we have, the interconnectors. In Congo, you have a lot of diamonds, but we can't polish those diamonds. When the ring is being polished somewhere in Europe and back to Africa, your child, my uncle, my nephew cannot marry and give a dowry of that diamond ring, yet the diamonds are being mined in Congo. Why? Because there is no electricity. So we should also remove all these deliberate policies, as I've said, legislative or non-legislative reforms, so that we move forward and forget about the past. But the best is to unpack. Inga phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. It will happen. But if we want to do it holistically, the whole 24 gigawatts, whatever it is, it will never, because everybody is scared in order to invest in a fragile state. I thank you.
We're running a bit out of time, but maybe we have time for one more question. Thank you.
Vous m'entendez? Donc la question serait pour le professeur Hegadorn, j'espère que j'écorche pas votre nom. Vous avez parlé de responsabilité individuelle et je voudrais vous demander vis-à-vis des Africains, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Enfin, si vous pouvez développer.
Thank you for the question. If I can paraphrase in English, is
Yeah,
that
it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so your question was, in Africa, what does it mean for individual responsibility for development? The same thing it means in Paris, in the United States, in China, right? It's a recognition that the individual has a role to play for her or his self-benefit, as we heard from Mr. Leperc, right? People are not motivated necessarily to save the world, but they're motivated to live a healthy and stable life. So in Africa, it's the same as it is anywhere else, right? We all have the same goals: to educate our children, to live healthy lives, and to avoid violence and lack of justice. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think you have something more specific.
Yeah. Does it mean we all should cook on electrical stoves, buy Teslas, or because the way of life in Africa can't afford that, so we can have the same responsibility as European countries. You should be the the first to do that.
Yeah, no, I recognize there are vast differences in the level of economic and social development. My point earlier, and I mentioned an example from a film in Malawi, right? There are small incremental steps that are not difficult to either put in place or to finance, but it takes some ingenuity, it takes some access sometimes to microfinance, but those are those incremental steps where an individual with some energy and smarts can create a wind turbine to generate water pumps and electricity for the village that has been overpassed by the big power company generation station. So yeah, there are solutions out there. There are organizations that are there to support those solutions, whether it's NGOs, civil society, foundations, or even the big banks. But it will take an incremental process. And then bigger projects like dams in Central Africa or electrification projects, those will contribute to a national development, but it has to be done holistically with good policies in place. So I'm sure the Minister of Energy in Malawi is talking to his counterpart in the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Agriculture, if I mention that or not, hopefully. And those are that's the type of national leadership that we hope to see in COP, in other fora, but it doesn't stop you as an individual, it doesn't stop a mayor. What I'm excited about, I talk about all the time with my students, is don't wait for countries and national governments to solve the world's problems. Let yourself act, and then look at cities, look at small townships, village mayors. It's really exciting what's happening. The city of Paris is doing more to support sustainable agriculture and food than the whole country of France. So those are the types of initiatives that are very relevant here in Africa.
Okay, thank you.
We still have 10 minutes, I was told. So let's go ahead.
Maybe I can comment on this point here. I think, like I was saying, it's not possible for everybody to drive a Tesla. In today's technology, the battery is just at the beginning, and there will be innovation over the next 5 to 10 years. And yes, 1 billion people still cook every day with coal fire, and these people won't have access to electricity, hub, and gas everywhere. But it's a transition. Things takes time. I appreciate the frustration, and I think one of the reasons is also internet. When I'm talking to my friend in Yaoundé or Monrovia or Lagos, they all have internet, and they see what's happening in the Western world, and they have expectation. They have desire to own
the latest shoes and the latest internet device. But the answer is it takes time. Yes, a lot can be done, and I think one of the main subjects we haven't discussed too much today is investing in education. If we have, investment in education in Africa, then you're starting to create your own ecosystem and get access to better jobs and better lifestyle. I hope it answers. And just to complement this gentleman's question, please don't cut this tree. I think nature capital is evolving rapidly. Without those trees, we will not be breathing the same air in Europe or elsewhere. I was saying recently, Liberia is in the process of selling 10% of its entire forest, a national forest, to a UAE company for $500 million. So investment can be made from nature, and that money should be reinvested elsewhere, and that's the way forward.
Can we get a microphone to the back of the room, please? Or you can come to the table and just press the button.
Hi, my name is John Mink. I'm a family office manager in Switzerland with the objective of setting up an impact fund in Switzerland to promote development in renewable energy, among other topics. I have a question regarding, I'm sorry with the name, Mr. Leperc. I think there's something contradictory in what you said. I hope I haven't mistaken your point. You said it's the private industry that's gonna do this. We don't need governments. We don't need these events. We should focus on acting. And at the same time, you say China is a really good example, and the solar industry, everything's getting cheaper. I personally think, as the Mr. to your right side, sorry, I forgot the name, said we need actually more government, and China gets subsidies, and that's why electricity, like solar panels, are getting that cheap. We've missed of subsidizing the solar industry in Europe. That's why we're standing there right now. I think we need more government. I think we need more public-private partnerships. I think we can't, even though I'm a business student and I work in investment, I think the private industry has failed at proving in various industries that they have really the interest of our populations in their mind, and it's more short-term profits in their head. So I think we need good collaborations between governments and the private sector, because the private sector has innovation, but the governments have a long-term approach for the interest of the populations.
I could not disagree more with what you just said. I think we're dying in Europe with that wrong mindset. I'm going to tell you about my own experience. With Solar Direct, we built 3 gigawatts, including 1 gigawatt in India. And right now, for Solar Direct, which is a company my first solar company, which was sold to NG in 2015. And we're bringing power right now, I mean, the installations to 5 million people, including in India. We were the best bidder in the National Solar Mission in 2011. And we showed the way together with our Indian teams of how to reduce the cost of solar far below levels. Now, getting back to China, there could not be a worse understanding of the Chinese system than to say that there's a guy on top who decides and picks winners. All the Chinese solar cell and manufacturer are private. Right now, in the last 2 years, 150 companies have been launched in electrolyzers. In Europe, we have 10. They're all subsidized and they're all dying. Why? Because they're just waiting for the government to step in. In China, you have a ruthless competition. competition, creation by entrepreneurs. And yes, support by banks, support by customers, support by the rest of the ecosystem is a way to work. So I invite everyone that has this wrong idea of China to go there, to discuss and to see how these ecosystems have been launched, to meet my friend Lei Jiang, CEO of Envision, who bought, I advised him, I told him, Lei, what did you get involved in batteries? And he bought the batteries of Renault Nissan 5 years ago, and he was investing 2 billion euros in northern France. By the way, the French president showed him red carpet treatment. What we have today in Europe is lack of entrepreneurship, lack of leadership, yes, from politicians. And what you want from politicians is not their money, you want their vision, you want their leadership. And what we are lacking in Europe in terms of infrastructure right now is a dramatic lack of leadership. But what we don't want is government money. What we don't want is Soviet style, pick the winner thing, and anybody that thinks that Europe is going to go get away from its present situation with the bright minds of the Élysée Palace are dead wrong.
Any other question? Yes. Please, you can just go to the table and speak to the microphone. Press the button. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So this question is for you, Monsieur Le Perc. So why do you think that in France, for example, there is this lack of leadership that you mentioned? I'm curious to know.
French Minister Mr. de Villepin once said at the United Nations, we are an old country. And that's what happened with old countries, or people who think they're old and look at the future with anxiety. And what we have today is not just a political thing, it's a social thing in the country. You have today, unfortunately among the young people, a fear of the future. And the good news about Africa, and I think this is what Africa should show the way, Africa is not in a very good situation. And yet, Africans, most of them at least, tend to be optimistic. Look at the future and say, we're going to go. Well, obviously some of them are saying, I'm going to look for the future across the Mediterranean. But if you look at how many entrepreneurs, I've personally invested, I'm going to tell you, the best investment I've made is in Partech Africa. Partech Africa is a fund which was launched 7 years ago by Partech and African investors. By the way, it's based in France. And is invested in startups all across Africa. Amazing. All those African entrepreneurs are doing wonders, whether it's in Dakar, in Lagos, in Nairobi, etc. It's showing the way. What we need, honestly, in Europe is to travel more to Africa, to travel more to China, to travel more to Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley wants to save the world and still wants to save the world. It's looking at the future with hope and everything. And we in Europe have, I'm not saying it's all dark. We have young entrepreneurs, we have people who dare things. We have local governments who are moving forward. So it's, and what we need is those people, yes, to get together and build those bridges with Africa. And I think this event here, the MEDays, for me is a very important one because it's building those bridges. And it's showing that, you know, this depressed European thing is not the end of the world, that there is hope, and the hope is here on this continent.
Thank you so much, Mr. Le Perc.
At the same time, you said earlier that the conference should not be held anymore. That this conference should not be held anymore. You said that earlier.
We should stop climate conferences. This conference is very useful, and hopefully, I was there, to be honest, the first session 14 years ago. And I'm very happy to work with the, you know, I've been many times here, and I sense that there is this spirit of collaboration, and I fully intend to come back soon. No, COPs, to be honest, I'll be at COP as well, but I have to confess. But I think this is a waste of time.
Thank you. And the last comment, because we have to wrap up, unfortunately, because of time. Please go ahead.
Since you insist, I will talk. Well, I took your advice. I went to China so many times. I lived there as a diplomat, still going on business. And it's clear that investing in renewables, developing industrial capacity in that regard, is not because we love changing the climate, helping this and that. It's more about competitiveness as well. It's a business. It's job creation, and it's also gaining leadership in manufacturing, which is the case in China. China invested last year $565 billion in renewable energy only. This is 4 times that of United States. China is the leader in electrical vehicles and also battery and what you name. So in this industry, China is leading the way. That's the reason why EU and the United States are erecting one barrier after another on the Chinese export. So we can't do without China. That's the largest emitter of carbon emissions in the world. That's the biggest energy power in the world in terms of consumption, import. But we can't leave it as well because of the competitiveness. So I think one of the clear objectives we should have in mind is how to live, coexist with China. And because from what we saw when you talk to the US, and it sees China as a power which is going to take over economically, military by 2050. That's the China's peaceful rise strategy. And in every area, in artificial intelligence, military, space technology, energy, in many regards. Then also one additional point is about the security of shipping lanes. 80% of the world's trade go through the straits, seaways. What's going to happen in Malacca, Suez Canal, also Strait of Hormuz, Turkish Straits, Bosphorus? These are critical choke points. There are new trade routes that we discussed in in Delhi or Mumbai, G20. So there was a discussion of India, Middle East, Europe, new corridors. Then China's road and one road and one belt initiative. And Turkey also has its Central Asia and Iraqi development route. There are so many new routes. Israel would like to create also from the Red Sea all the way to Haifa, another corridor. So this is the geopolitics will have a very disproportionate role in our future energy projections and the policies. So we should never forget about it. I remember Clinton saying during his term, it's economy stupid, but now it's increasingly geopolitics stupid.
Thank you so much. I think we have to wrap up, unfortunately, but I really want to thank all of our speakers. This was a very impressive panel, a very impressive conversation, high level. I hope we can follow up with discussions later on, but thank you so much. And thank you for the Amadeus Institute as well for inviting us and hosting this event every year. We look forward to the next one. Thank you.